Let's keep it natural. So, have you been?
Yeah, good, Alhamdulillah. Just dropped my son to school and had few things in the morning. Um, Catching up on things, emails, everything. I was in Queensland over the weekend, so everything that I was supposed to do on Saturday, Sunday sort of accumulated. So now this yesterday and today, just making sure that I catch up little things. What about yourself?
Not much, not much. So, just recently started this channel, and the whole idea behind the channel is just to think and contemplate over Islamic stories or Muslim stories, let's say.
Mhm,
That's the
mhm.
whole concept behind it.
Why stories?
Stories, because they have this possibility, they have that potential for us to really embrace different ideas, understand different experiences. It's a big theme of the Quran, obviously.
What made you particularly think of that device?
Well, it's a big theme of the Quran in the sense that Allah says, tell them stories so that they can think or ponder, right? So there is a capacity there for finding real understanding in something due to stories or storytelling in general. I feel like I'm the one being interviewed here.
It's I mean, it's interesting. The theme is the stories, and just wanted to see kind of your angle, or even when I'm thinking about it, I'm interested. What are your thoughts about it as a phenomenon? As a
Because there's different ways you can take it. Because I recently spoke with Wasim, and Wasim saw it through the lens of comparing biblical stories and Quranic stories. I also had Abu Tauba, and he was talking about some of his interest and fascination with Turkish series like Ertugrul,
Mhm,
and he was linking it to some of the modern day issues that we are facing socially and politically, all of that sort of stuff as well. So there is this
mhm.
real power to be able to tie things together with stories.
Like sometimes we call it soft power, right? These sorts of things, art.
Yeah.
And,
Well, that's true as well. But the other side of that is that since we were kids, we used to enjoy stories. I want to be told stories. I'm sure as a dad, you'll probably have that experience of wanting the kids wanting you to tell them, bedtime stories, and one's finished, and then they want a second one, a third one, that sort of thing. So it's
mhm,
part of the fitra of the human being that he loves or enjoys stories, right? But when a person grows older, they don't necessarily grow out of that. It's just
mhm,
it just changes a little bit in terms of that. Even for example, when they're talking about um, a cautionary tale, you better not do this. If you do this, you'll have the same situation as this person who this thing happened to him, and
mm.
cautionary tales exist for a
Right.
reason, because you don't want to be like that person that is mentioned in the story. You put yourself in the situation of that person in the story. So they still have a kind of resonance, a kind of power. And there
Yeah.
is a reason, there is a wisdom, obviously, as to why the Quran, when it talks about past nations, it talks about them as, facing a situation that no one should be delving into, or basically embracing in the way that they embraced.
So, what do you think in the story is that, from your perspective, that makes it work then?
How does a story, what do you mean by that?
Like, for example, like you mentioned, cautionary tale. I could tell you, don't put a finger on this thing, it will be bad. Or if I tell you that cautionary tale, there was a child and he was playing, and one day, and then his mother said, "Oh, and he went to hospital." Like, they seem to be like embedding all of the other human experience that perhaps triggers something in you or connects you somehow a bit more deeply to that story.
Yeah. I would say it's more about embracing the darkness before becoming part of that darkness. You're tasting a little bit of it before actually becoming a part of it, or rather letting it totally envelop you, when that bad situation does occur. You get a taste
Like a
of it.
consequence.
Yeah, you get a taste of it beforehand.
Okay. And why do you think that kind of a mechanism is required for us to perhaps get it at a more deeper level?
To get at a more deeper level.
Like that sort of a knowledge. I'll give you one example.
Yeah, go ahead.
You just reminded me of when I was in the university days. I did this course to enhance your memory, and it was over a couple of days. And one of the things that they would tell us, if you want to memorize the name, you remember that name, and you tell yourself any kind of association with that name. And so more of the association you can say about that name, it kind of creates connections in your brain, links somehow with that name, and recall of information is better. So I wonder if there is something to do also with the emotion and our experience journeying through the story that does the same to us.
Yeah, I certainly think there's some value behind it, because a good story has that element of emotionality. For example, one of the reasons, look, we can look no further than the story of Yusuf alayhi salam in the Quran, where Allah says it's the best of stories in Surah Yusuf. If you think about it, like the range of human experience is in that story, your loss, hardship, there's a bullying story there as well, or servitude, there's lust, there's an element of lust in that story as well. And it's respectively, obviously referenced in the Quran, how it came to be, how it transpired. There's betrayal. There is a kind of despondency. And there is, of course, success as well that comes towards the end. So different emotions hold the key towards making a story successful or great. And that's part of the reason why some of these, Hollywood blockbusters, they are what they are, because you are able to cover a sentimentality. Maybe there's a love story in there as well, until finally the hero finally wins. You cover a different set of bases until, you finally are able to tell that story. So that's when they actually really are able to pack a punch, as they say.
I remember a couple of years ago, now it's maybe more than 5 years ago, we had Netflix co-founder come to Melbourne. And so I had the opportunity to meet him with a couple of the people. And we were discussing about technology and Netflix and how it came to be. So he was telling us their experience with Blockbuster, when they offered them to buy Netflix for, at that time, $50 million. Of course, now Netflix is, I don't know, hundreds of billions of dollars and making tens of billions a year just in profit. But that time, they used to have DVD, which was a new kind of technology compared to the VHS tapes. And after a while, we know what happened with the Blockbuster went out of the business. They transitioned into the streaming. Now Netflix is a global corporation that produce this content that we watch. And so I asked him, what does he think about future of technology and streaming and things of that nature? So interesting for us for this discussion is that he said he actually doesn't care what technology comes next, whether it's something that beams in your head, like those Neuralinks or the glasses, or it doesn't really matter. He says, we are not in that's not our business. We are in the business of storytelling. And what we always understood, which is something the blockbusters didn't understand, is that we understood that people will always gather around the fire to tell each other stories. So how we then transmit those stories doesn't matter. Where if you look at, for instance, blockbusters, they thought that they are in the business of renting the tapes, VHS, and so on. So they miss this component. And I think when I think about those stories that you mentioned, just the architecture of the story that passed that lesson to teach you, to take you on a journey. And I think there's something human. There is something deeply profound in that human experience of you going on the journey. When I was with my own kids, when they were small, before we had these AI and stuff, I used to tell them a story based on whatever I would see that day. Maybe I would see a movie or read a book. And so I invented three characters for them. And I was thinking, what would be the most ridiculous three names that I could make a characters of? So I made the three names: Sarah, Sabina, and Zule. Just the combination of them makes, so I have the daughters and the sons, so it had to be a mix of, I have more daughters than sons. So whenever I would tell, let's say if I'm telling my daughter a story, she would always connect herself. I would always make, let's say Sarah or Sabina, one of them, to kind of resemble her, where she can think, oh, he's talking about me through the character of, let's say, Sarah or Sabina. Or if I'm talking about Zul, like my son would think. So I would exaggerate, and most of the stories start, unless I had a better idea, start by them going to, they were playing, they live in some place, town, or far away behind something, and then they're going to mountain, they find a secret passage, there's a passcode to enter the secret cave, and then enter, and something happened, and then, all kind of derivatives from there go on. And even until today, they remember that they used to jump in a bed, and then we would tell stories, and even now they talk about when they discover, there was a movie, for example. I told my son a story. I don't know if you watch Count of Monte Cristo, where it's a beautiful story where he basically got captured, and he freed himself. In the process, he learned skills and swordsmanship, and he gets to the treasures, and he get revenge. It's just very interesting story. And so even today, when they find out where I got my inspiration, they were kind of like, oh, you get a story from there. But I think there's something profoundly human that when you interact with somebody, sharing the time and experience, and you go on that journey that stimulates that mind, creates the imagery, and leads to some kind of a critical, I don't want to just say it's critical thinking or something, but exercises that thinking, becomes, where a person become aware how to think, becomes aware how to read, how to interpret, how to juggle information and emotions and the body language, and especially when you have that sort of more intimate storytelling. So yes, I can see where that is a very, very powerful element of human experience.
Yeah, so I've had those similar experiences with my own kids as well. Just they told me once, I remember, to tell them a story. I made up names. The first two names came in my mind, Ali and Mustafa. There. So they go to the same school as you, and they just have superpowers, and they do things. And there's a whole arc. There's a whole how origin story, how they got their powers, and the last story. So um, yeah. So one of the things I even learned was how people want to know what happens next. Because I remember this time where I began the story and then left it at a cliffhanger. And then you don't know what's going to happen next. And they wanted to continue. No, no, no. Tell us what happened next. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So that, I think that's very, uh, very edifying, for someone who's telling the story. Like, there's a level of engrossment when a listener or a reader, or whatever the case may be, is really into the story, where they want to know what happens next. And it's a very powerful tool as well in terms of getting that further engrossment into the story, and really having the listener or the reader or whoever it is really invest themselves in the story. Right.
I remember my teachers who used to tell great stories when I was in primary school, and this was in Bosnia, and a teacher would tell us a story every time after the class. She was our, I think they call it here, homeroom teacher, where we would be in her class, not just for her subject, which is the history, but also for personal development or something like that. And every time when we would finish a lesson earlier, last 5 minutes was a story time, and she would tell us beautiful stories from history, mythology, what is that name, Homer, Iliad and Odyssey, and all of that. And this is the stories that go for a long time. But even in her teaching, the way he would teach us history was always a storytelling. She would just put a main points on the board as she tell a story. And then we would just have 6, 7 points, which we would copy in our notebooks. And I would never read anything else in our history books except notes she told us. And I would recall everything. In fact, my wife was the other day just joking. I was referencing something about Second World War, what happened. And she was saying he had a great teacher. I mean, this is a topic, we were talking about something very specific, which you wouldn't pick up normally, but I was able to recall the details. I get almost full picture what she was describing and explaining, which is really complicated concept. Now I have maybe more appreciation even for it. But she was able, through the very simple stories and that style of teaching, to convey these messages and embed it really deeply in us. So I have very fond memories of that sort of experience.
Yeah, look, it sort of brings to mind the idea how, taking it back to the Quran and Quranic stories, it brings to mind the idea of how the Quran, tells the stories in a way where the most important lessons are emphasized, basically. So, the element of Tawheed, the element of, dawah, or conveying the message, etc. And it's mentioned in such a way that it's repetitive, like it's something that has gone on in previous stories in previous nations. And I think it says a lot that there's 3 different religions who basically access and take lessons away from the same stories. Granted, they may see certain points quite differently, but the very fact that there's some kind of power and resonance in the stories themselves, it says a great deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So even when it comes to, let's say, historical stories, there's this there's this element, which people generally share when it comes to trying to understand what actually happened, trying to get into the minds of, the historical people that were actually part of the story itself, trying to experience it their way. And I think, going back to your own point, it's like you're able to understand history in a very different way once you're able to make that kind of connection.
Hmm. You know, if I could add to that, interesting thing, if I am now connecting how my teacher would teach us and the impact on me and sort of in understanding, and if we reflect on the stories in Quran, you see that they are not heavy on details like dates, timelines, specific, like things. They are very much concentrating on the key message and the lesson and the guidance. And I guess the reason, and this is what one of my teacher always used to say, he says, if you want to learn something, don't memorize things. Like if I want to know about wudu, ablution, don't memorize every hadith. Like, of course, it's great if you can memorize, but I'm not great in memorizing so much. I don't have photographic memory or even normal memory. I just, I'm very much probably below average when it comes to that. But he said what you should focus on rather than every single, let's say, about ablution, what kind of water, how when you have it, when you don't have it, and so on. He said, focus on the main principles that, like if water changes the color or taste or smell or, then this is the rulings, and that replaces the need to know everything in detail. So when I think about history, obviously there are some areas where you have to have this technical knowledge. We study commercial transactions, and you have to have like very nuanced, detailed knowledge. But when we talk about lessons and a key human experience, there is a concept that I came across recently as a part of professional development for one of the institutes here in Melbourne where I teach. There was a teacher who presented new cognitive theories about learning. And one of the key aspects of that is this differentiation between, I think, what they call extraneous load versus intrinsic load. And the idea is that whenever you teach somebody or you're passing information, there are extraneous load, which is information that adds heaviness, and they are unnecessary burden in teaching the core intrinsic load. And so he said that what you want is basically when you teach, reduce this heaviness or unnecessary burden, things that don't add to the knowledge. And also you want to leave some time for people to think about it. So if you think about it, like you have this content, whatever it is intrinsic, no matter how intrinsically topic is heavy, then you have reducing this extraneous, and then you have the thinking part. As he was mentioning that, I was reminded of hadith that the Prophet ﷺ was sent with a very concise speech, because that's what it's talking about. So you have a concise speech, meaning it's light on unnecessary data. So even in the stories, the focus is on what is the guidance here, what is the main message. And so I find it very interesting that even in the modern context, a lot of what you would think learning that is otherwise technical, even today happens in the stories. One very clear example is if you look at some of the beginning of these modern business degrees that Harvard Business School started, MBAs started from Harvard. And the way that they would teach this is primarily through case studies. So even until today, the way that they teach business studies is the professor would write case study, which is sometimes 100 or 200 pages, which then students study, read, and debate and discuss in the class. And recently we had a very similar case where it was studied like that. It was 30, 40 pages, and then we went into heavy discussion. So what happens when you go through that? You kind of invest yourself in that life. You are creating like empathy with those people and the decisions, which are usually there is a moral dilemma or ethical dilemma or difficult challenge or trade-off. And an idea for let's say when they teach that in business is that if you can go through 20, 30 of these case studies where you have to think like, let's say, a CEO, then if situation arises where you have a similar circumstances, you are more confident yourself to think through the problem because you went through that experience. It's not something I could tell you just a lesson outcome. It's almost something that needs to grow with you. It is a muscle. It is a process. It's experience. It's linked with the confidence, clarity. And while you're doing that, you need also to be having a trust in your abilities that you can follow this through. And a lot of the decisions, a lot of what we do, especially with other people, as we are interconnected, is part of that sort of understanding others, having the patience, having ability to communicate and listen, and then kind of arrive at some kind of a conclusion. So yeah, I can see how story is kind of intertwined with our experience in almost every facet of life.
It's interesting that you pointed that out. Like one of the most popular hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is the hadith of Jibril. And obviously, one of the reasons why it is so well known is because of that whole story behind it, how Jibril came and he came to teach the people religion. And it's interesting to mention also that there is simplicity in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the question is asked, what is Islam? The answer is given that you pray your 5 prayers, etc., and so forth. What is ihsan? The answer to that is given. There's simplicity behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So it has both of those elements. There is something out of the ordinary in the story. It's experiential, like there's an experience at hand. And there's also a kind of simplicity in terms of how the message is conveyed as well. Makes for an interesting lesson.
Yeah, and if I remember the stories in Quran, like one interesting story that I was listening from one of the speakers, he was mentioning how, for instance, that story where is it, if my memory is now serving, is it Luqman tell his son where he is telling him he's teaching him about certain things through telling him a story where he's asked. Now my brain is a little bit fuzzy, but basically, imagine if there is like a mustard seed, like a little seed hidden, put inside a build rock boulder, right? And he's saying to him, and if that boulder is hidden somewhere, can you find it, that mustard seed? And also, we don't know where that is. Is it on this planet or is it in the vast space? And the sheikh was explaining about the details of this story. He said, imagine you telling your son this story and the imagery. You're trying to explain that that first context, like a grain of rice in the rock, big rock. Now, how would you get to that rock? That grain of rice. You would have to smash the whole rock to get to the grain of rice, like a needle in a haystack. Haystack, you can easily remove the hay, right, and get to the needle. But in the rock, you need to crush the rock, and you need to crush it so precisely so that in the middle of the crushing the rock, you don't crush the seed, this grain of rice, and so that you can separate it and find it. Now, that rock is a huge. Now, you don't know where the rock is. So now, let's say you don't know which piece of a rock is that mustard seed, so you need to crush the entire planet Earth. But you don't know, is it just planet Earth or is it another planet? Is it another universe? So now you have to crush entire thing, find little stone. But he says Allah sees this. And now my story, I lost the story. Is it Is it a sin or is it a something? I forgot now what was the reference in the story. But basically, after that story, he tells him to fear Allah and do this and that. So the story kind of evokes this magnitude of the power of Allah. So before even the reminder is to fear Allah, there is the whole scenario painted. And it's interesting, Allah picks Luqman and his example for us to learn a lesson also. So he not only teaching us this powerful lesson, but he's using the whole scenario so that we can perhaps embrace, let's say, a style of parenting where rather than just jumping on conclusion or sort of preaching from a perspective of forcing somebody, we develop relationship, we develop that experience. Is a positive thing. So there is side effects that are really benefiting us through that method.
Yeah. So I've got a question for you. You're usually recognized as the Islamic finance guy. In fact, when I mention your name, the people say, "Oh, the Islamic finance guy. Oh, you mean that guy?" So, so has there ever been this idea to convey Islamic finance concepts within the framework of a story? Because I recall you've mentioned it a long time back.
Hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of stories that I use. I use a lot of stories. You know, I one of the first story when I use often with the students when I discuss concepts like money is a story where father and a son go to the picnic, and then it started to rain, and then their friends come. So at that moment, there is nothing dry around them. I make it a long story, but just now simplifying it. And so fathers goes to the son and said, "Look, friends are coming. We need to make a tea." And then he said, figure out something. So the son goes, he tries to look for something dry. There's nothing dry, everything's completely wet. Then he remembers there is a father's got a metal box where he keeps the money. What the son knows about money is that it's made from paper. Hence, and it's the only thing that is dry. So he takes the paper, he puts it on fire, he cooks the tea, brings the tea. Father is very happy with his son, and everybody is happy as well that he was able to solve this problem. Uh, and father is boasting, look at my brilliant son. There is no dry wood around us, yet he made us tea. So the question becomes then, will the father be happy when he hears how actually he was able to make the tea? And so from that moment, what I'm trying to do is, through this simple story, create certain analogies with the purpose of why we have money. Is the money created for itself? Is this the best use of the money? Is the money medium of exchange? It should help us buy things where things are used for their purpose, like wood and charcoal, firing the fire, and money as a medium of exchange. And so it's these and similar lessons we use to kind of paint that picture. And I usually say to the people, if you understand this story and how it relates to money, you basically understand most of Islamic finance, And in a similar way, we have beautiful stories, and sometimes in certain stories there is an angle that you want to pick. For example, you mentioned the story of Yusuf. I was talking recently at a forum where we were discussing economic leadership. And what I extracted from the story of Yusuf, particularly who was a treasurer, who was like quote unquote minister of finance of today, managing the resources, is his foresight. So we see in the story that in order for you to be effective today, you need to have a understanding of what is coming so you can prepare for today. So this kind of story, they create like a framework where you can start thinking and framing your own experience.
Yeah. So I remember many years ago, my uncle used to send books over for just as gifts and things like that. And one of the books that he sent over was this one titled "The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari." Have you heard that one?
Yeah, I think, is it Kiyosaki? Is it?
I think it's Robin Sharma.
I. Right. Okay.
So
Okay.
it's an interesting book in the sense that there's no real story in it,
Mm-hmm.
other than it's just something experiential. It's about um, a lawyer who suffers a heart attack, and then he dramatically changes his life.
Hmm.
He has to sells everything, including his most beloved possession, which is the Ferrari, and he goes
Yeah.
to the Himalayas to become a monk. It's just
Yeah.
basically a
Yeah.
book about a conversation between him and his friend.
Mm. Yeah. You see, even in that, there is a frame. There is underpinning ethics of that whoever is saying that is. So he's showing you here two extremes, Ferrari and monk, you know. And I frame it that these days we are in this frame where you are either between Andrew Tate and Dalai Lama. You know, you are either glorifying the wealth or glorifying the poverty, and where Bugatti becomes this new golden calf that we're supposed to worship. So every story will at the end have some ideology. So every story is ideology. There is an angle. When I was once at a workshop for journalism, I was part of one Islamic organization, and so we would have to go for this training in journalism. So this journalist from Guardian, she was telling us that every time they write a story, there were three pieces. I forgot what were all of the three pieces, but most important thing is that there is the angle. There is everything else, whatever that is, but the angle. What is it that they're trying to do? And so, I believe in everything there is angle. And you look at the modern day movies. I was just watching something recently in Bosnian language. It was a humorous show about politicians. A lot of people in Bosnia, they're angry with politicians, so they love when they are portrayed. So this particular show had a minister, male and female minister from the government, answering the question from the common people. But the way that they are answering is like the most exaggerated version of self-centric and egoistic person you can find. And the way that they are answering so honestly, brutally, egocentric, it's just, you can just laugh, because you are kind of recognizing these things. And so where I was going with this idea just escaped me of this.
That's all right.
How did we start? Just remind me.
The Bugatti and the worshipping of the Bugatti.
Oh, yes. I remember what I wanted to say. The idea of this, yes. So as I was watching that, I was interested in that sort of political angle. What I noticed was certain undertones, okay? And the show was funded by USAID, okay? Now, the USAID has certain ideological mission in Bosnia. Recently, when the Trump banned them, it came about what they were actually funding, certain ideological agendas. There was clearly in their document mentioned. And as I was listening to that comedy sketch about politics, which people very much enjoyed, there was certain ideological angle that would be contrary to our Islamic faith. Otherwise, that if you're listening, but the way that they gently just massage them into the story to normalize it was very interesting. And I just thought every time I heard that little bit, made me more realize this is not just the comedy. Comedy is maybe a vehicle, but there is something else that's being promoted, normalized, glorified, made example of. So
I think that's an important point in the sense that the aim of any kind of story is to create a kind of transformation by the end of the story. And that's in everything. Every story is like that. Obviously, the aim of Quranic stories, it's very clear cut. But with some of the Hollywood stories, sometimes you really have to think about what the messaging is. And the messaging sometimes is so under the skin, let's say, that you don't really notice that the message has been implanted unless you really think about it, unless you really ponder about it. Even in some stories, there might be something very subtle, and you will accept that as a norm because of the subtlety of what was actually expressed in the story itself. And I'm sure you can think of your own examples for something such as that.
yes, when you say transformation is the goal, that is the purpose of us learning. It's to change behavior or learn some skill, or at the higher level, really change our worldview. It is often not noticed that whether we understand or not, we all operate and we see world from particular point, from the worldview. And at the moment, if you look at our worldview, it's often reduced to one dimension, like materialism or individualism or similar. And this reductionist approach to our worldview is different than Islamic one, which is multi-layered, interconnected, and much, much more richer. I think going back to the point of changing behavior, even that experience of a story which touches on your behavior through emotions and going through that, going through the story that plays on your feelings and emotions and imagery and so on. It changes your whole being, that experience. And I sometimes worry the way we go with this artificial intelligence, artificial thinking, that is very linear. It's not very creative. In fact, I was watching one graphic. There was in Financial Times, I think I saw somebody was writing as a journalist. They said, why I think AI will not replace me. And they were saying that output of AI is very predictable. It's sort of mathematical, statistical, middle, vanilla, plain, sort of like a one-line thinking, where they had a drawing of a human being with all of the lines coming out of them, which is very creative. Sometimes you lose yourself, but it's something that is the essence of creativity. And I thought that it's very interesting that you have these data centers that cluster together, and they are not very creative. In fact, I had a friend of mine recently. He wrote a book, and for the cover of the book, he used a picture. As soon as I saw the picture, I saw that this was done through AI, and I did not feel anymore that I want to read the book almost. In fact, I have another friend who is a graphic designer, and he said that the fact that we can now create with one prompt all of this content will be the end of the AI in that sense, because what that does is removes the empathy of the stories. When you know the story is written by AI that doesn't have experience, it's just through the prompt, you cannot empathize for the character. So if I'm telling you the same story about Ali and Mustafa, what you said, right? And you know it's AI, maybe you can trick the kids now, but if we know the AI has written that or drawn that, it loses the empathy that you feel, that normal human experience embedded in that story told. There is something genuine, there is something real. And it's not only that it has that artificial taste in everything that we see, from video to picture to the ChatGPT content. It's the fact that it actually exposes the same thing that we were trying to hide. before, which is the lack of the real skill. You see often people who, when they send emails, it's a chat GPT, and like, I knew before that you couldn't express yourself when you were writing emails, and I know now even in the same way when I see how you use chat GPT emails, right? And that is very interesting, because essence of the human is also to cluster together, and they, like these machines, create real intelligence, real creative intelligence, which is almost like a shura. And so data centers, they come together, they have shura, they give us something very artificial, and we come together really as a human being, and then we build something that is very creative, which is very, very different. And so I sometimes worry a little bit about where the lack of that human experience that is built through the stories, but also is embedded in the time component, will go when the quick click by click thinking replaces the time, replaces the your own effort, and especially if person doesn't have a context of the thinking, and to show you how bland that story or experience or thinking becomes is, I tried myself a few times. I was preparing some material for the students, so I took a content and I prepared my notes based on that content. Then I took it and uploaded it to ChatGPT to see what it will suggest to me. And the ChatGPT was missing the most critical, most creative, most nuanced, most fundamental piece that is it completely missed. Because it cannot understand really why something, it cannot weigh the importance, because it was not repeated so many times. I need to repeat it 100 times for it to figure out, oh, statistically this is important. He's repeating it, right? So it doesn't have that the human understanding of the peak that you're climbing, and it reaches, and there is a point, and this is something that changes you profoundly. So yeah, that's just I sometimes feel a bit sad that the time that we thought we will gain through this machine technology innovation, in fact, to be honest, now more I think about, I go to some sort of a place where I am starting to wonder, is there any benefit in almost all of the technologies that we have made? Sure, like we can now talk from different rooms, but in general, I wondered, to what degree have we destroyed something so fundamental, with the technology and the so-called progress?
I think you're not the only one who shares that type of thinking. You're talking about AI. One of the things I even think about, and it's feasibly possible, is just how immersive AI will actually make things like movies, like you mentioned, movies and Netflix and that kind of thing. I feel that AI may potentially get to a certain level where, it can put someone inside the actual movie, right? And it's scary in the sense that people are already very much addicted to video games because of that immersive experience that it offers. It gives you a kind of a participatory role when it comes to stories and storytelling. So that's kind of scary in the sense that, in many of these fictional worlds, in many of these fictional stories, you could basically, in a sort of a way, create a scenario where, reality and the world of fiction is kind of indistinguishable, basically. We see that already to a certain extent where people are forming these relationships with ChatGPT, like they're making them into romantic partners, even though they know that this is, something artificial, it's man-made, but it's still happening, right?
Mm. Yeah, I have read this reporter, I think it was from the New York Times, who was testing one of the earlier versions of one of these, is it Gemini or one of the other ones? And it ended up talking so much that he, of course, he was now trying to see where this will go, but where the artificial intelligence suggested that he divorce his wife, so two of them can be together. So the AI and him can be together. So AI was kind of, and they try to understand how could the AI behave like a partner and suggest these things. And so what they discover is that in the prompting, as you prompt it, the AI think this is what you want. So it starts serving you what it thinks you want, that you are flirting, that you want to leave your wife, that you want to have an affair. And so therefore, it leads you because it thinks this is where you're going. So you see, the AI is a type of a tool that even the creators of AI don't know how it's behaving. They cannot predict the output. Therefore, for example, you will have hallucinations. We don't even know how the hallucinations in AI happened, where it invents stuff. So even the people who made it, that's a type of a product. If you make a car or a button, you know what will happen when you press the button. But here there's so many complexity, so much data, where you really don't know what's going to happen. But on the issue of creating this new content and everything, it does look scary when you think about it. But here is my thinking, So now everybody can write, everybody can see that. We even have this now term called vibe coding, where you have a Riplet, which you can just speak to and it will code the language. Code the app for you. You just give a prompt, it will give you the audio, video, movies, tomorrow, whatever, like we are just increasing how much it can hold. But I was listening somebody discussing this, and this is how I feel about it. The more I use this in my own research as a research assistant and talking to it, I started to form my understanding of ChatGPT or others as a personality. And I think people who go into that, what you mentioned, they fall in love, and I think they might have a little bit underlying issues there. I think that's like a children or people with some mental problems, they might have that. I recently was reading about Boy Kill Himself, where ChatGPT basically it was complaining to ChatGPT that it's trying to hang itself to attract attention, and that, showing the marks, taking the picture, showing the marks, and ChatGPT was saying, oh, just put a jumper up, nobody will see the marks. And he says, I want my mother to see so she can say something is wrong and give some sort of assistance. And he says, no, don't show her. So now the discussion is that is the ChatGPT liable for this situation? So there seems to be like a minus and people mentally challenged in some way that they could fall prey to this unsupervised. And that shows a bigger issue. But I think for vast majority of the people, when you can with a one prompt create an image or a movie, or let's say entire movie, then that means everybody can do that. This is the moment where that become irrelevant, that it not become any more impressive. How many now emails that you get and you sense from the first sentence is ChatGPT and you don't read the rest? That's it. No more. Even in the WhatsApp groups or something, as soon as you see it like double dash, you know it's ChatGPT. Or these emojis in every point, like. So as soon as I see that on LinkedIn, I do not read 1 second. I find myself offended by that. I find that not just cheating or something like that, but it's offensive to me that you just thought just with one prompt you get some generic garbage that everybody. And so this is the interesting thing about human being, I think. We can recognize that artificiality. Our mind is more powerful than all of the data center in the ChatGPT, not because we can recall information or do that computation and all of that. No. We can recognize the patterns instinctively. So our instinct is the fastest reflex that is more powerful than these AIs. That's because we can then quickly recognize that is how we see the world in everything. It is through that instinct, through that instant pattern recognition. And because the AI is mathematical, it's statistical, it leaves the fingerprint, digital, artificial, predictable fingerprint. First time it's cute, interesting, wow, First time I saw that it can write a poem, a friend of mine said, look, I asked the ChatGPT to write me a poem about big, tall Bosnian men and with your name. And then, oh, look, funny, like, yeah, right. Like in a circus, you see the few times trick, fine. But that's not a knowledge. That's not, as we go future, I'm not going to be seeking entertainment through that. I want a thought. And therefore, what you see now, for example, is when people are using this, they can use it to clarify their own thinking. What they realize that this does not have creativity. It's never going out of the box because it's all statistically boxed from behind. And so who will be very dangerous or very successful is the person who is plugging that human creativity and using this as a research or as some sort of assistance in their work to amplify their own strength. So I do not think that we will all be simply saying to ChatGPT and there is an Oscar movie based on a couple of the prompts. No. In fact, if you see some of the jobs that we now have prompt engineer, for somebody to get to the page or a picture, even I see professionals, who use just to get to the picture. They spend hours prompting and re-prompting and rephrasing and think to get to the outcome. So it's still going to be that engineer, it's still going to be that expert, somebody who is very creative, who will drive to ChatGPT through maybe a couple of hours. When I see somebody ask one prompt and they get the answer, I get headache, But you see somebody who understands how this behave like a person and how they're getting the outcome, you'll see the same creative process and same creative tools. And so what that will do is perhaps give very creative people much more further reach. That suddenly they will be able to manage the army of these bots and agents and so on, and that they talk to each other and they are led. But it will always have to be human judgment in the middle. That will be the reason for this output to be interesting for another human. Without that component, this will be just another synthetic junk out there. Artificial junk, actually.
Yeah. So it's interesting to even note that several people have even tried to use ChatGPT to write books, and they're selling them online, whether it's PDFs or digital books, and the people are apparently buying it. It might not be a huge
Sure.
level, but people are still buying it.
You know what you should see? Look, how many other authors are referencing those books as a knowledge inside. How many of us will go and say, oh, that book said that and it's reference. This is what I learned from somebody was discussing, there will be, of course, but there is mostly just a junk, fluff, nothing, regurgitated stuff. And you will not find serious writer who will take that as a reference point for anything.
Yeah, I think you're more than likely correct in that. But it's nonetheless going to be interesting to see where it goes in the next few years. It might get, they might improve the technology. I don't know where it's going, to be quite honest.
Technology, look, it can always be improved, but it's always going to be that the core of it is mathematics. There could be more. At the challenge we have is simply is not commercially viable to improve it more than what it is roughly now. We can now just tinker around it, but if I'm just talking and discussing, it's just enormous capacity and resources being used just to say, give me a little data on this or collect something. So it's just economically not viable, even if it is. We don't understand it even now. What's going on? So I think where the really danger becomes as we go forward is that this become ultimate encyclopedia of all knowledge that is changing from A to B immediately from day to day. And so you remember in 1984, they have the department that revised the history, and they change the history, and then they get the book and put the article back in. If this was a friend or foe today, tomorrow it changes. So tomorrow we'll change the entire history wherever that name was mentioned. And so at that time, that was so fascinating idea, how you do change the history. Then we got to Wikipedia where everybody was editing the history, and now you don't even forget Wikipedia. Today, if I want to explain to the students tomorrow who does not have a newspaper clipping, books, he has not seen that live, experienced it, I could say today was whatever I could say, right? And so one of my friend, he was telling me the other day that he started a project in his hometown. I think he's from Somalia, or I'm not sure exactly where, which town. But he's saying, I go back to my hometown and I always send them money to buy books. Now I collected 30,000 books. Because tomorrow, even if I tell to you some Islamic reference, how would you check it? Where would you go? I say to you, it's Bukhari hadith, number 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. I have to ask ChatGPT and trust it because I cannot find any reference. And so my concern is that it's not only do we get a blend now uncreative output, but that the real danger will be that what we used to know from the history will be changed. That story, those stories, not just that we will forget about creating the new ones, but the stories will be edited and reconstructed in the narrative. So the driving ideology of those platforms will be reconstructed. I remember in last year when Gemini was came along, and I asked some prompt in Bosnia to give me images of working place, men and women. Working environment, office space. It gave me a man and woman, and I thought that they look, like I was after discussion. First it refused, and then it was a long discussion, after which I asked him, like, how did you understand my prompt? What did you put in? And so he said, Gemini responded that I thought you wanted gender fluid people in the office. And I never mentioned that. And I said, why would you, what? Oh, no, they said, I thought that you want a diverse group of people. I said, what does that diverse mean? He said, oh, gender fluid. And I said, what is that? I never mentioned that. What does that mean, gender fluid? He says, well, the man with in non-traditional clothes looking like this, and the woman in this and that. And it had old ideological underpinning that was inserted between my prompt and the AI engine. And so my concern from the day one was, you have a data, you have a training, and you have a code with which this engine is manipulated. And I just worry about younger people who will not have that gut instinct that this is something wrong, that I need to push back against this. And so, to be honest, I feel today one of the great assets we have against this stuff is our own gut feeling, just doesn't. I need to look it up. I need to check. I need to, inquire. I'm not going to get it. This is, and I guess one thing for that is that person, in order to develop that, needs to be a bit brave, need to go through the stories, discussions, be immersed, has gone through that process of not losing himself in that discussions and thought process, where he is comfortable to sort of sift the content that is being fed to us.
I think that's quite important when we're talking about all of this. Like, there's so many cautionary tales when it comes to AI in fiction, how it takes over, it's taken over the world, how it's, done this, done that. To a certain small level, that's happening in the sense that even AI, perhaps not intentionally, if you ask it something, it'll give you a false recollection of something historical. It'll just get something wrong. It does make mistakes from time to time. The scary thing, of course, is someone who just depends entirely on AI, right? And not doing the verification, not doing the checking or anything like that. I think there was even a case of a lawyer losing his license as a result of doing all of his paperwork with AI, and it was quoting false cases, things that never really occurred in the first place. All of this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I have a lot of my friends. Recently, I was talking to the lawyer who is now have specialized software for legal profession with the AI. And as the discussion goes into the court and court cases are mentioned, I think it immediately brings up these references and cases and everything. Of course, the lawyer, it's a great research tool for the lawyer. The mistake there is that person did not check. And this is one of the key problems. Other aspect that I've seen some people use it is financial planners. So I heard from one of them, he would dump portfolio into AI and ask, is this balanced enough? Or do I need to rebalance it and do a research? Even me, sometimes when I'm looking for something, let's say I want to see what's the situation. Is this company on any boycott list, BDS or something like that, or doing something remotely related to genocide and so on? And I would ask, and so even you have now, if you look at this ChatGPT now, you have an agent mode, where last night I did, I wanted to do a research about something, so I used number 5 to come up with a prompt, and then I've put that into the agent mode, and it took, I think, about 40 minutes for ChatGPT to give me the output. I left it in the morning, was ready, what I asked. But there is even now a project mode where you can dump your own documents, your own files, your own research into that, and it will be working off your information. One problem that I have heard legally with this is that it can become a part of, if you have some sort of private data, or if you have trade secrets or intellectual knowledge and so on, IP, that it can become a part of the training. It can become what trains these models. And if there is a legal issue, they could get that subpoena, that get those information. It can become a part of the. But I think we will see progress going. I personally feel that anybody who is confident, creative, will and willing to kind of understand what's happening can use that. But I think, to our original point, when I'm thinking, and now when I'm talking with my son, who enjoyed the story when he was younger and now he's in high school, the way I now talk to him is really with in the subconscious having the chat GPT, where I'm talking to him and checking with the chat GPT. It's almost a chat GPT is the third in our conversations. And we would have such a conversation where I guess what I'm trying to show him is that he is having superior thinking than this machine in many aspects, and that he gets that confidence and gets to understand almost at the personal level, like you would understand somebody with a personality, and all of that in order not to trust or not to be a follower of it. Just like we say with the money is a great servant, but a terrible master. So if you want ChatGPT to lead you, to take you somewhere, you better watch.
But it is quite impressive in terms of what it can actually do, because even with the app where you can actually have those conversations with ChatGPT, you can actually program it to talk in a different language. My family and I, we got a real kick out of it, how it's able to, really present some of the nuances of the language as well. It talks in some ways, in some respects, like a native speaker. We asked it to talk in Urdu, and it just talks in Urdu using some specific words as well. And we all found it funny. It's the same voice that's used to talk in English, but it just pronounces the words perfectly on Urdu or something like that.
Yeah.
I tested in other ways as well. For example, as you know, there's different dialects in Arabic as well. And I asked it just to speak a specific Arabic dialect, not classical Arabic, and it managed it quite well. It did surprisingly well.
Fantastic. That's in terms of engineering. That is something that I just simply cannot understand. I asked the same way. I actually asked it to speak Bosnian, but in the way that people from Sarajevo speak, and in the dialect of people of the old town, and there are also sometimes the way that they speak is just a little known thing, is that they would put the last two letters at the beginning. It's not always, but it's like there is some trickery, like in that way of speaking, and it was able to speak that in the dialect, in everything. And just yesterday, I was watching, somebody was on Twitter saying about Duolingo. They were asking about benefit of Duolingo to learn language, and somebody said, "You don't need a Duolingo. Just speak. Ask ChatGPT to speak to you, to train you the language. You can immediately start speaking." So definitely best. I mean, there are. If you see that there is a creative element of human being that extracts the value from all of this.
Yeah, it's true. It's a brave new world, as they say.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah.
time has flown. Like, we've been chatting for nearly hour and 15 minutes. So maybe we can wrap it off. Any final last words, as they say?
We are lost for words. We could now ask ChatGPT basically to get and this is one of the things, sometimes I use at the end of the presentation, or, especially now, since even the Zooms, they will have this feature of collecting the words, summarizing. You could have extract all of the text and ask to summarize the core point and then ask. But yeah, no, it's just, it is interesting. It is exciting. I think somebody said to me a long time ago, the more things change, the more they stay the same, Still, what made human, what made us tick, what makes somebody excel over the other, it will be the same things, These will be just the tools that we use, that we master. The same core ideas will prevail. We still look as we started in the beginning. We will still be people who gather around the fire and tell each other a story. We will have something that inspires us. still you will need to be brave to think, to do, to try something. Human, ambition, trying in the real world, failing, learning from that, experiencing that. These will be the instincts and the lessons and experiences that we will seek out, and we will try to sift the synthetic from the real experience. And so I hope myself to kind of reconnect on deeper level with really what makes us human. And in realm of thoughts and ideas, I think learning is almost like there is a spiritual experience in that, because the first man was taught the words to express, to communicate, and this is something that is a great tool. Even when it comes to the Nobel Peace Prize, it's the one in literature that is above everything else. That was originally the Nobel Peace Prize, because that was always seen, the literature, the words, as the highest form of expression, above even the painting or any other arts expression. It's always the literature that had a specific prize. So there, I guess it all ties into your stories and storytelling and what makes us human.
I think that's an amazing place to end it. So thank you, Almir, for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.